Good morning. It's an overcast day here in Sharpsburg, Maryland. Phinn and I are right now at the monument to the 9th New York Infantry, and we're going to take a couple of moments and read one of the accounts from one of the soldiers from the 9th who fought here on September 17th, 1862. So the 9th New York would have crossed Antietam Creek off in that direction over there and come to this spot on the hill. And they would have done most of their fighting right here. And that's why their monument is on this spot. Like it says, the greatest mortality occurred near this spot where the regiment contended with a superior force of infantry and artillery. And so the rebels would have been off in this general direction here when the 9th New York came up. Over there is the 8th Connecticut, and right here is the spot where Isaac Rodman, Brigadier General, was mortally wounded. This is David Thompson's account, 9th New York Infantry, from September 17th, 1862. So the morning wore away, and the fighting on the right ceased entirely. That was fresh anxiety. The scales were turning, perhaps, but which way? About noon the battle began afresh. This must have been Franklin's men of the Sixth Corps, for the firing was nearer, and they came up behind the center. Suddenly a stir beginning far on the right, and running like a wave along the line, brought the regiment to its feet. A silence fell on everyone at once, for each felt that the momentous now had come. Just as we started, I saw, with a little shock, a line officer take out his watch and note the hour, as though the affair beyond the crest were a business appointment to which he was going to keep. When we reached the brow of the hill, the fringe of trees along the creek screened the fighting entire, and we were deployed as skirmishers under their cover. We sat there 2 hours. All that time, the rest of the corps had been moving over the stone bridge and going into position on the other side of the creek. Then we were ordered over a ford which had been found below the bridge, where the water was waist deep. One man was shot midstream. At the foot of the slope, on the opposite side, the line was formed, and we moved up through the thin woods. Reaching the level, we lay down behind a battery which seemed to have been disabled. There, if anywhere, I should have remembered that I was soaking wet from my waist down. So great was the excitement, however, that I have never been able to recall it. Here some of the men, going to the rear for water, discovered in the ashes of some hayricks which had been fired by our shells the charred remains of several Confederates. After long waiting, it became noised all along the line that we were to take a battery that was at work several yards ahead on the top of the hill. This narrowed the field and brought us to consider the work before us more attentively. Right across our front, 200 feet or so away, ran a country road bordered on each side by a snake fence. Beyond this road stretched a plowed field several hundred feet in length, sloping up to the battery, which was hidden in a cornfield. A stone fence, breast high, enclosed the field on the left, and behind it lay a regiment of Confederates, who would be directly on our flank if we should attempt the slope. The prospect was far from encouraging, but the order came to get ready for the attempt. Our knapsacks were left on the ground behind us. At the word, a rush was made to the fences. The line was so disordered by the time the second fence was passed that we hurried forward to a shallow undulation a few feet ahead and lay down among the furrows to reform, doing so by crawling up to the line. A few hundred feet or so ahead was a similar undulation, to which we ran for a second shelter. The battery, which at first had not seemed to notice us, now apprised of its danger, opened fire upon us. We were getting ready now for the charge proper, but were still lying on our faces. Lieutenant Colonel Kimball was ramping up and down the line. The discreet regiment behind the fence was silent. Now and then a bullet from them cut the air over our head, but generally they were reserving their fire for the better show which they knew would get in a few minutes. The battery, however, whose shots at first went over our heads, had depressed its gun so as to shave the surface of the ground. Its fire was beginning to tell. I remember looking behind and seeing an officer riding diagonally across the field, a most inviting target, instinctively bending his head down over his horse's neck as though he were riding through a driving rain. While my eye was on him, I saw between me and him a rolled overcoat with his traps unbound into the air and fall among the furrows. One of the enemy's grapeshot had plowed a groove in the skull of a young fellow and had cut his overcoat from his shoulders. He never stirred from his position, but lay there face downward, a dreadful spectacle. A moment after, I heard a man cursing a comrade for lying on him heavily. He was cursing a dying man. As the range grew better, the firing became more rapid, the situation desperate and exasperating to the last degree. Human hauteur was on the race, and there burst forth form if the most vehement, terrible swearing I have ever heard. Certainly the joy of conflict was not ours that day. The suspense was only for a moment, however, for the order to charge came just after. Whether the regiment was thrown into disorder or not, I never knew. I only remember that as we rose and started, all the fire that had been held back so long was loosed. In a second the air was full of the hiss of bullets and the hurtle of grape-shot. The mental strain was so great that I saw at the moment the singular effect mentioned, I think, in the life of Goethe on similar occasion. The whole landscape for an instant turned slight red. I see again, as I saw it then, in a flash, a man just in front of me drop his musket and throw up his hands, stung into vigorous swearing by a bullet behind the ear. Men fell going up the hill, but it seemed to be all over in a moment, and I found myself passing a hollow where a dozen wounded men lay, among them our sergeant major, who was calling me to come down. He had caught sight of the blanket, rolled across my back, and called me to unroll it and help to carry him from the field, one of our wounded lieutenants. This is David Thompson's account of the 9th New York Infantry at the Battle of Antietam, the Battle of Sharpsburg, September 17th, 1862. Thank you for watching.